40 to 50 text messages saying IHOPKC mishandled their emotional and sexual abuse.
That is insane.
Mind-blowing.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win.
All right. Welcome back to Wake Up and Win podcast with your host, Christina Foray.
Hello.
And myself, Blaise Foray. Excited to be with you again today. Not necessarily excited as far as the topic. This topic is definitely not very fun to talk about, but at the same time, I feel like it's necessary to talk about. We had a lot of great feedback from our last episode. So if you have not watched that, go back and watch the previous episode from a few days ago, and that'll give you a lot of foundation. But let's just dive right in because there's been a lot of updates just in the last 48 hours for us. So let's start with the article that came out, because I think that'd be a great foundation for people that haven't, maybe heard some of these interesting developments. So
yes, definitely.
We'll
okay, and we'll post
it.
a link to this in the description. This is from Julie Royce. I'll just go ahead and start. International House of Prayer announces independent investigation, but victims and advocates remain wary. Facing allegations that its founder, Mike Bickle, sexually abused multiple women, the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, Missouri, announced Sunday it has hired a law firm to conduct an independent investigation. Speaking from stage at IHOPKC's Forerunner Church, Stuart Greaves, executive director of IHOPKC, said the ministry acted within 24 hours of official notice of the allegations to meet with Bickle to remove him from leadership. Then IHOPKC hired Stinson LLP, a major law firm in Kansas City, to conduct an independent investigation, Greaves added. He did not give details about the investigation, but stated, when this examination is completed and based upon the findings, we'll be able to determine what next steps should be taken towards healing. Michael Brown, an apologist who preached at IHOPKC's Forerunner Church on Sunday, said IHOPKC had committed to publishing the findings of the investigation and urged people to trust the process. This is not being done for damage control, Brown said. This is being done to bring the truth to light. It is not being done to protect the team here from lawsuits. The whole goal is to have a serious law firm investigate truth because there are very serious allegations that have been made. But Brown also appealed to those listening not to talk about the ongoing scandal. You may have an opinion right now, Brown said. Keep it to yourself. It does no good. There's a process in place. Brown also encouraged people to delete prior social media posts, saying he believed IHOPKC leaders were sincere and they care about the women. So let's work together rather than against each other, Brown added.
I make my appeal. Let all the public speculation stop. If you keep it up, you're doing the devil's work, not God's work. Let the attacking as if we're on different sides and the accusing back and forth, let it stop. If you've posted things already defending, attacking, pull the posts. Honor the Lord. If you post pastoral things or things that are edifying and helpful, let the Lord be glorified.
Brown's comments sparked pushback on social media. Former spokesperson turned whistleblower for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, Ruth Malhotra, tweeted, "Your appeal to refrain from posting online can have a chilling effect on survivors and advocates. While attacks and speculation are unhelpful, earnest questions and concerns should be welcome, not stifled in this moment." And then there's a screenshot of the tweet Michael Brown posted. He said, "For the record, my public request today was that we not post attacks or defenses, re Mike Bickle and IHOPKC, while the third-party investigation takes place. Instead, I ask that we only post if we have something edifying or pastorally helpful to say." Ephesians 4:29. If I can stop right there.
Yeah, of course.
I just feel like whenever I read that too, it's just, we've already talked about this, previously in the last one, like asking people not to post on social media, asking you to delete your social media post, and then only talk if you have something pastorally
helpful to say.
Yeah, it makes it feel like if you're not a pastor, then you need to shut your mouth right now because only pastors are allowed to speak on this. To me, that's how I read it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because when I read it, I don't necessarily see it that way, but that's just because I was in ministry for so long, and if I read that word pastorally, I don't think of pastors. but I think most people think of pastors.
What do you think of?
I think of being able to help, like even in a one-on-one context. I might not be a pastor, but I can pastor someone through a situation. So I think Brown was probably using it in that way, but that's how ministers talk. It's honestly above people's heads sometimes. I don't even mean that in a weird way. I just mean like they talk like, pastorally, and he's thinking maybe, well, if you can edify, which what does that even mean to edify? Okay, building up people. Well, sometimes edification requires rebuke first, or sometimes it takes exposure first, like Ephesians 5 says, it have nothing to do with the deeds of darkness, rather expose them. So that's actually a scripture, exposing. So, but how do you expose if you don't ask some questions? And then if only people that are reading that would be like, because I agree, I think most people would read it and be like, pastorally helpful. Well, that means that only leaders, and it's implying that leaders can discuss this. Rick,
because he definitely is back and forth multiple times all
over the place with this.
Over his Twitter. He's responding to people and saying stuff. So it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
You want to read Ruth's response?
Hi, Dr. Brown. Or wait, did we already read that?
I didn't read her response.
Okay, so this is Ruth Malholtra. Who is she to Ravi Zacharias Ministries?
Let's see.
She was the...
No. Hang on.
I'm just...
Former spokesperson turned whistleblower.
Okay, so if anybody doesn't know, Ravi Zacharias passed away a few years ago, and he was a major figure in Christianity and apologetics, specifically arguing for the faith. And he was a big time player in that world. So he was outed after his death, which was pretty crazy, but and very sad on all sides, for abusing multiple women, etc. So she's speaking from that whole thing that happened a few years back. She says, "Hi, Dr. Brown. I appreciate much of what you shared at IHOPKC, but your appeal to refrain from posting online can have chilling effects on survivors and advocates." Oh, wait, we already read this.
Oh, I did read it. You're right.
Yeah.
I guess that was just a screenshot.
Welcome, not stifled. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, similarly, former RZIM director said, Carson Wheatenauer posted, "I agree with Ruth. Attempting to manage the narrative will understandably backfire." Brown contended there is no attempt to manage the narrative. There's a passionate appeal for all kinds of gossip, speculation, and accusations to stop. Yet two former IHOPKC prayer room pastors, Jim and Nancy Hester, told the Roy's report they don't trust IHOPKC leaders to properly handle reports of abuse based on their past experience. This is so interesting because, just to comment on this, like, I can understand Dr. Michael Brown from an outside perspective coming in, asked to come into a very tough situation. Good on him for doing it. Good on him for doing his best to try to navigate that whole thing. And then saying from the front, take down your posts about things, like basically judging the intent of people posting as though that everybody is in the same boat and everybody's just this gossip monger or something like that. And saying, everybody just take down your post. There's a process in place. We got this. And Dr. Brown's not saying we, he's saying they got this, which is saying trust them, okay? Well, think about what you're saying, Dr. Michael Brown. And I'm not saying this in a weird way to him because, I respect this guy massively in so many ways. But in this scenario, he's put in a very tough situation. So I'm putting myself there and saying, if I said, trust these 2/3 IHOPKC leaders and the law firm that they put in place to navigate this. There's a process. They care about the women. Okay, so there are 3 other former leaders that are high-level leaders that have been trusted for many, many years at IHOPKC, especially Alan Hood. I mean, that guy is very trusted to the point that he was leading the entire school, the university, for years. So who do I trust? Trust now the 2 leaders, Stuart Greaves and David Sliker, and then Isaac Bennett, who's the pastor of Forerunner Christian Fellowship. Kind of feel bad for Isaac. He's young guy, just came up, all of a sudden he's leading this church, and now he's caught up in a scandal. I actually feel bad for him. If I were him, and I know what I feel like I know now based on some other things, I would resign.
Yeah,
I would
for
leave.
sure, 100%.
Like, so so they're saying trust the process. Michael Brown saying trust the process. Well, do you trust Alan Hood, or do you trust that Stuart Greaves and Dave Slyker are not trying to protect the organization and that they really did put in the best process? Because if everyone stays silent and doesn't have a chance to process or talk this through, then some of the things that are coming out might not come out.
Right.
Because what if the process is tainted? Well, trust them that it won't be tainted. How do we know that? Make sense? So
Right.
Anyway, should I keep going?
Yeah, let's go.
Jim and Nancy Hester. The Hesters said a woman came to them in 2016. So these people were on staff. And just so people are clear, on staff at IHOP, you could be on staff there. They had 2,000 staff when I was there for 5 years. So it's like all these staff are not being paid. Some staff are paid. Most staff just raise their own support. Jim and Nancy Hester were likely being paid to actually help lead the prayer room as pastors. And they're older. So they're not just folks that are 30 or 40 years old. They're older. So the Hesters said in 2016, they came to Stuart Greaves. Said a woman came to them in 2016 to tell them how Stuart Greaves had mishandled her 2014 report of a rape by a former IHOPKC staff member. Rather than help the woman, Greaves shamed her and urged her to not go to the police. The woman told TRR, the Roy's report. Nancy Hester said she tried to help her get an apology from Greaves, but he refused. Recently, Hester went public with her concerns about IHOPKC on the Heaven Bent podcast, Season 4, Episode 6. Since then, Nancy said she's received conservatively 40 to 50 text messages from men and women claiming IHOPKC mishandled their emotional and sexual abuse. 40 to 50 text messages saying IHOPKC mishandled their emotional and sexual abuse.
That is insane.
Mind-blowing.
This one woman is getting 40 to 50 texts.
Yes.
About all of these crazy. This is insane.
And this is what happens is you can hear this, and especially if you are currently on staff at IHOPKC, which I know some of you are listening, you think, oh, well, the Hesters must just be bitter. They must have just not liked the way that they were handled, so they're offended. Just stop yourself from thinking that, and please just listen to the information. Because not everybody that's not where you are right now is bitter and burnt and angry. And even if some of them are, you might still need to listen. All right. Hester said she hadn't had a chance to talk to all of them, but both Jim and Nancy said they've heard enough that they've lost confidence in IHOPKC's executive leader's ability to handle cases of abuse and are calling for them to resign. What I've found is that what is proclaimed from the stage was not implemented in the day-to-day practical expression of Christianity, said Jim Hester. My desire is to see the ELT completely disbanded. Greaves does not immediately respond to our request for a comment, understandably. Many of those questioning the investigation focus on the investigation process and the firm that IHOPKC selected. Writer and abuse survivor advocate Nancy French asked Brown if victims have to go through the church to connect with Stinson LLP and suggested the firm advertise a hotline for victims to report. Brown said, you end up with every kind of wacky accuser, quote, you end up with every kind of wacky accuser, including disgruntled former church members. But he assured French that accusations would be treated with the utmost seriousness.
Hold on. That's the part where I'm also like, again, not that I have beef with Michael Brown, but like he's coming in here, keeps tweeting. He gets to sit there and tweet all day long, calling people wacky accusers. Like, how do you think that's going to make victims feel, calling people wacky accusers? Like, I just don't understand. That's not edifying. That's not pastorally whatever he said. You can only tweet things that are
one thing
edifying.
It is it's managing a narrative, and whether or not he feels like he is or not, that what he's saying there is saying we cannot open up something like that for people that have been anonymously, are anonymous accusers or defendants to come and say something, because you will likely get wacky accusers. Okay, well, what's the statistic of accusers that are found out to be completely, just that they definitely lied. There's a statistic
It's
out
like
there.
90 something. Like I think 92% of
It's
allegations
92%.
turn out to be true.
And 8%
So
turn
there's
out
a
to be a
tiny
lie.
percentage.
So the 8%, they're wacky or they're lying or they're this, that, or the other. But 92% are actually found within the church world, I think is what it was, to be relevant. And so let's keep going. French replied, wacky accusers is the wrong posture. Victims will read this exchange, see your skepticism, and stay silent. Brown further clarified that the church and law firm won't be publicizing a hotline or contact information because no one is claiming that there's scores and scores of people involved.
Even though they just said that they got 40 to 50 text messages.
He doesn't, and that's the thing. He doesn't know this.
Yeah.
He is this outside man who loves and respects Mike Bickle, said he was friends with Mike Bickle, and he's just coming in to back cleanup and possibly totally pure-hearted, helpful. I actually think those things about him. I think he's pure-hearted. I think he's trying to be helpful. I just think that he's coming from it from a wrong vantage point, and he is real. I don't know if he's going to realize it. I don't know. But one thing I would encourage him to do is, I mean, it is a different generation. That's one of the things that I'm noticing. Like when we listen to Remnant Radio's podcast, these guys are all like pastors that are 30 to 40, very well respected, have had Mike Bickle on their show like a month ago or 2 months ago, and they addressed it and are saying very, very similar things that we said on our podcast. It made me wonder if they watched ours the other day. But they're putting Rick Joyner and Michael Brown, they're holding their feet to the fire. And I think it's because it's a different generation. We are a social media. This is how we communicate. This is how we communicate. We're not just throwing accusations and even if there are some people, that is that's on them.
And also I'm just like, why is every message right now, again, Rick Joyner, Michael Brown, Chris Reed, why is everything around this topic about gossip and not about like sexual allegations, like this terribly huge thing going on? And it's like, and you're worried about gossip right now? You've got bigger problems right now than people posting on social media. Why don't we address that? Why don't you do a message on that? You know?
Yeah.
It's just like mind blowing.
Well, it's definitely something that, I mean, I think, you know, you look at the Me Too movement and you look at everything that went down with that. And I think there's, in the conservative Christian world, there's this feeling of like, well, what if there is a false accusation? You can ruin somebody's life. Because you see that those stories do exist. But they're limited to the stories that, what if there is an what if when the accuser is accusing and it's real and that person gets off and is able to go do it again.
Right.
And again and again. Right?
Right.
And it's like, so anyway, should we keep reading?
Yeah, there's more.
Okay. Sam Hood, let's see, hold on. Oh, okay. He said, the law firm will contact victims who already have come forward, Brown said, and then the victims can pass that contact information on to others, which, by the way, I don't know what victims would be playing ball with that law firm at this point. After you watch after you watch Stuart Grief's from stage, whether he meant to or not, he said, and one victim from 26 years ago that has some credibility. What about that victim? What if that victim was actually sexually involved with Mike Bickle from a power player standpoint, Mike being what at that time? Like 48, the victim possibly being much younger because they worked with tons of young people. And what if that did happen? Because apparently it did, and they're listening and hearing those words, some credibility. What if it's just credible? I can't stand that statement.
Yeah.
The more, since I've heard it and since I've heard some things that I've heard since then.
Yeah, it's like, what was the point of that?
Oh, it was to totally discredit a 26-year prior victim, plus to actually let IHOPKC organizationally off the hook. Why? Because IHOP was founded in 1999. This happened prior to IHOP. You think we care if it happened prior to IHOP's founding? We've let this man run and with global influence and possibly at least abuse 26 years ago, which that means he probably never should have ever started IHOPKC. well, what if he didn't? Then this wouldn't have happened. Oh, you really think this man is that the savior of the world is dependent on this one man? I think that this man is in danger for his soul at this point. I do.
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
I think, I mean, we've talked about this, but I think all of this coming out is like mercy. Mercy on him. It is like, okay, now you are confronted. Like, this is your last shot to like repent and change your life, because this is bad. And it would have kept on going until he died.
Yeah.
So this is like,
and I'm just mind blown.
Mercy on his
and everybody's
life.
like, wow, well, Mike has never stood up for himself. He never defends himself. That's one of his MOs. Oh, well, that sounds so just, what do you call it? It sounds so just like grandiose and incredibly humble. I just let God defend me. That's awesome, except for when you're being accused by multiple women of this, and some are definitely credible. You're not going to say a word, and they're not going to say from stage that he's innocent. No, you need to come out and actually repent and step down, like literally step out, or you need to come out and deny. Like, don't sit around with this global platform and say, well, I've never defended myself.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And the very last, I had a conversation with somebody today, the very last sermon, he said he listened to it, the very last sermon that Mike preached prior to this coming out was about, in the end times, there will be great accusations against God's messengers.
This was the Sunday before this all came out. Yeah. And that's why they're saying that about, like, don't reference the dark horse, because he did in the message
about a prophetic vision that said that the dark horse is the accusation against.
Which is honestly, my opinion here, is proof to me that Stewart and Sliker do believe these allegations and do think they're true. Because if not, you would come and you would be like, instead of saying, don't talk about the dark horse, this isn't that, don't use that prophetic language. If you believed that, then you would say, this is the dark horse.
Yeah.
We knew this. He like prophesied this. He's innocent. He's, they would have his back and they would say, this is the dark horse. But instead they're saying, don't talk about the dark horse. Don't use prophetic language. It's like, why not? Do you not believe that?
Because you know that these allegations are legitimate,
right?
And this man did something like this. The next thing I want to say on this, and we may keep moving forward here, but like, I know, because I was at IHOPKC on staff for 4.5 years. I worked directly with Stuart Greaves, and I had situations where, and we haven't even gotten to some of that stuff, but
we got to finish this.
Well, I know how people think in IHOP, staff members, how they think, how they feel about things. Oh, those people are just accusing us, or even if it is legitimate, like the prayer movement, IHOPKC must go on. We will not let the fire on the altar go out. You think the fire on the altar that the fire on the altar is this prayer that's happening in Kansas City? Jesus Christ, the Spirit of Jesus, spoke through the prophet Amos. Let justice roll like a river and righteousness like a never-ending stream. Your songs and all of the jubilant stuff that's going on is little to nothing if there's an organization, a 501c3, that says, well, we give to the poor. Mike's last message was, oh, I just drive a 2008 Honda Accord, as though that's some like righteous thing. Like, while literally covering for a man that did all this abuse. It's like, from your vantage point, folks that are still there and saying, we must go on, we must fight for this, we must take a stand for this, because even if Mike is guilty, we trust Jesus and we've given our life to this 24/7 prayer thing. Well, you might want to rethink about the foundation from which this was laid. And I'm not saying I don't love 24/7 prayer. I actually do. I have many beautiful, sweet encounters with Jesus in that prayer room from midnight to 6 a.m. I was the crazy one that literally kept that thing going for 4 years from midnight to 6 a.m. I was one of those. And I'm so thankful for it and my time there. But just because Jesus can meet us in a broken system does not mean you keep that broken cistern going. Sometimes you have to go, this thing is broken, and I think we need to like clean up shop. But anyway, all right. You read the thing that Sam Hood said.
All right,
Alan
let's
Hood's son
see.
in the.
Samuel Hood, a longtime former IHOPKC member, posted several questions about the investigation on Facebook. Is the third party an independent investigation organization that specializes in allegations of abuse in a Christian environment? Has IHOPKC dialogued with the survivors and received their approval on this third party investigation? Which these are some questions that, you know, our last podcast that we did, we mentioned they had hired a law firm, and that seemed a little questionable because a law firm is hired to protect you. So anyway, so he's coming out with these very specific questions, and it is interesting that they didn't hire somebody like everybody's saying Grace, you know, is a good option.
They hired Grace. Come to find out, they hired Grace in 2018 when they were found out to have allowed a staff member that was currently working on staff in 2018 who was exposed as having a sexually immoral relationship with a minor, I think, or something back in California like 20 years prior. So he was exposed for this. He was on staff at IHOPKC, and when he was found out that he was on staff, they brought it to the leadership team. Hey, this man did this at our church years ago. He needs to be kicked out or taken away out of leadership and out of staff. They hired Grace to come in. Grace did their thing. Grace made recommendations to IHOPKC, and IHOPKC did not respond to those to the recommendations. They did not take the recommendations, and they let the guy stay on staff.
Yeah.
Mind blowing. But this is what you do. Like, poison seeps down from the top to the bottom. And if mid-level leaders didn't know this about Mike, you know, I would love to just give the benefit of the doubt that they never knew this. But whatever was going on from the top to the bottom is the way that they handled these allegations in the mid-level leadership. It was always covered up for the organization. Let's get into the allegations of past mishandling of sexual abuse, and then maybe we can shut this one down.
Yeah, because this is about to be like the meat of it.
Okay. So, allegations of past mishandling of sexual abuse. I'm going to let you read this one.
A woman who asked to be anonymous told TRR that IHOPKC mishandled her report of being raped by an IHOPKC staff member in 2014, but has refused to acknowledge it. TRR does not report the names of victims of sexual assault unless they ask to be named. However, we confirmed the woman's identity with Nancy Hester. The woman said she reported her rape to Greaves, who subjected her to numerous meetings at which he and other leaders questioned her account and didn't provide her care. One time, Greaves used her phone to call her mother to say that she was making up this story. Greaves also pressured her not to report the matter to the police, saying it wasn't rape. She added that Greaves claimed the police wouldn't believe her, and involving the police would only result in bad press for IHOPKC. Once, Greaves invited her to a meeting that her abuser also attended so that the woman could hear his side of the story, she claimed. Like, that's
shady tactics. That's shady tactics. And the only reason that I know that that's probably true is because I have watched those kinds of tactics be used in my own experience.
That's happened to you before, where you were kind of like ambushed.
Blindsiding and ambushing is a normal tactic. Now, when I look back, I just, and I wrote a blog about this. I ended up taking the blog down and actually apologizing for writing the blog because I was like, well, I don't want to just be blasting people. Maybe they had good intentions. Maybe I was just young and immature, which I was, because I had a theological difference with IHOPKC. I left. I was posting my differences. They called me into multiple meetings. And I always felt this feeling like I have to go to this meeting. Now, as a person, you say, why did you go to the meeting? Why would you go? You're not even there anymore. Why would you go? Well, it's definitely like this spiritual authority thing in my mind that was honoring my spiritual authority. And like I still viewed it that way. But the younger guys that were with me, the other two, they were like 25 and 22. And they're like, dude, why do we got to go? I'm like, y'all just come. Like, but we were posting online about our theological differences, and it had impacted some of the people in the internships. And so they kept wanting to meet with us. And I even truly think there was some like there was good-natured, good-hearted intent, which intent versus impact is two different things, right? So the intent was to help us and this, that, and the other. We show up at the second or the third meeting.
You think you're meeting with
I'm meeting with Stuart. I'm meeting with Stuart.
Who is also, I think it's like worth mentioning, was like your mentor at the time.
Correct.
Like your
had
spiritual
been
mentor.
Until I left. Had been.
Right.
Yeah.
But you were close
for probably,
to him.
Yeah. Like, I mean, not super tight. Like we did life and hung out all the time,
But you looked up to him
yeah, I mean,
and
he
looked
was,
to him for
he was 35.
advice,
I was 25, or he was 40. I was 30, whatever it was. Yeah. Like, I think 35, I was 25. I mean, I was just something like that. And that difference of range. And I looked up to him for advice. He'd been in spiritual leadership for a long time.
And somehow, even though you were already removed, you still felt that if he asked you to do something, you needed to do it.
Yeah.
So he asked to meet with you while you're gone.
People ask about this question, spiritual abuse. What are you talking about? I actually remember somebody asking, like, hey, when I read your blog, I looked at you were in that room for 6 hours. You know, you're in that room for 6 hours, then why didn't you just get up and walk out? It's kind of like what you say to somebody that if they were sexually abused, and this is nothing to the extent, I'm not saying this at all for me. It's like, because I was fine after all of it, you know, after all my counseling. Not really, but I was fine at the end of the day. This, like the sexual abuse thing, is so much greater as far as the long-term implications and how it affects people emotionally and physically and everything. Future relationships, their current relationships, everything. But what I know is that you can't say to a victim, why don't you just get up and walk out? Like, because especially when you add the spiritual component. So when I'm hearing this, I'm going, holy crap, like the guy had prophetic spiritual authority over people. Mm-hmm. Then you add to it the fact that there was sexual abuse. And when I say sexual abuse, I'm talking about the Mike Bickle allegations. Mm-hmm. They're saying there was, you imagine being with somebody 20 years your elder, 10, 15 years your elder, and you're being mentored spiritually. You're getting these prophetic words. You're being, I mean, best Bible teacher you've ever heard. And suddenly you're in a compromising sexual situation, like where you're like, wait, is this right? Is this wrong? Or I honor this guy. I like this guy. Or should I like this guy? Or I mean, just the confusion and just like, then the shame afterward. Do you come out and tell? Or do you ruin the ministry plus everybody else that he's impacting? That's positively impacting, including yourself. You've been positively impacted. The confusion has got to be mind-blowing. So when I watch this happen with me, I go into a meeting with my two buddies, and by the third one, he's like, hey, we need to meet one more time. So, and on the property. So we go and meet on the property. We don't even go there anymore, but we go to the property, meet, going through this back door. And in the old leadership team room where I used to meet with the Night Watch leadership. I mean, I used to run different programs. I was like, people look at me and they go, you're just a kid. I'm like, I'm 40. I'm 40 years old. I did this when I was like 25 through 30. So I'm not just this dude trying to throw out random stuff. But I'm back in that room, and suddenly we walk in. We're sitting there waiting, and then boom, Sliker walks in. And I didn't know Sliker for nothing, but that man can talk. That man can debate. That man can bring, like, he knows how very well to,
But you guys
to
were caught
talk
off
over.
guard.
We were totally caught off guard.
And now you have these two leaders. Yeah.
ELT members, top level leaders that are 10 years our elder and spiritual, looked up to them, all this stuff.
And whether somebody thinks that's a big deal or not, or right or wrong or whatever, it is showing you
Exactly.
how they handle things. It is showing you their system, their patterns of
and we
how
proceeded
they
to be in a
things.
6-hour conversation on theological differences and why we were doing things wrong. When I
And
look
this
back,
is like the middle of the night,
yeah,
too, right?
it's the middle of the night because Stuart was on night watch. So it wasn't like they were trying to get us in the middle of the night, but it was in the middle of the night. So, but I'm just like, even that, I'm like, well, whatever. Like, I don't feel like it just showed a pattern of the way that it was normal for them to be like, you walk into a meeting, oh, there's another person. We're like, well, it was 3 on 2. No, they're 10 years our elder, and they're connected to Mike Bickle directly. And you're just like, these guys knows way more of the Bible than I do. They know, they're way more prophetic than we are. Maybe we need, like, just all these different.
So whenever you read this, you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
It makes
Her
sense.
abuser is sitting right there. She walks into a room.
And he's in there.
He's sitting there.
And then be quiet, listen to him.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so this girl says that she got raped by this guy, and
You
he
told
was
her-
a staff member.
Yeah.
And okay, let's continue on.
You go ahead. My computer's about to
Okay.
die.
All right. Once grieved, invited her to the meeting. Okay, he said, She said, I had to sit there through the entire thing. And anytime I tried to say anything, they silenced me. And they're like, you need to listen. You need to show some respect. You need to hear his side of the story. He told the story of me seducing him, this girl says, and pressuring him. And every time I was crying through it, they would be like, why are you crying? You're being so overly emotional right now. After months of traumatizing meetings, and that's the thing that stuck out to me too about the meetings, this constant meetings. You feel like there's an email that come like, hey, it's time to meet again. And I'd read it and I'd be like, I don't want to meet, but it's probably the right thing to do.
I should do that.
I should do that.
Yeah,
like,
this is the right thing.
It was absolutely more painful than the original incident itself. I couldn't take it anymore. I was like, I will do anything you want. Just please don't make me talk about this anymore. They said they can make it stop if I retract my statement. They said, we're going to bring him in and make you apologize to him. She relented. But in 2016, this woman connected with Nancy Hester, who was the former pastor with Jim Hester over the House of Prayer. When we say pastor over the prayer room, it just means that they were like, they put these people in place to deal with people issues, and they pay them a little bit because these people are good with people. So Nancy and Jim, they're like, well, these people are good with people. They can be the pastoral people while we lead stuff. 2016, we'll end with this. This woman connected with Nancy Hester, who tried to bring the matter to IHOPKC leaders. IHOPKC leader Alan Hood listened and cared well for her, both Hester and the woman. Soon afterwards, Greaves came to Jim Hester to get his help discipling a different man accused of a different sexual crime or sexual misconduct. Forgive me, not crime, sexual misconduct. Hester said that Greaves told him, this is Jim Hester, Stuart Greaves told him that the woman had called police after the alleged assault. But Greaves convinced the woman not to press charges. Hester added that Greaves arranged for IHOPKC to double the man's stipend. When we say stipend, that means he was likely a worship leader or a top-level worship musician, and he was probably making $250 or $500 a month. That's what a stipend is there, maybe $700 after all.
So yeah, explain. Not everybody gets a stipend,
No.
right?
It's, you got to be like a decent musician to get it, or a worship leader to get it. Some of those top guys get. Or
didn't you say you got a stipend?
I did. Yeah, I was a teacher.
You're a teacher.
Yeah,
okay.
I taught.
So
at
this guy was
IHOPU.
obviously on some sort of, would you say, leadership?
Some type of
position?
leadership influence, and so
they doubled his stipend after he got.
They felt like he needed some stability and some encouragement to be in the prayer room, said Jim Hester. Hester said that when he challenged Stuart on the arrangement, Greaves said, have you never had an impure thought before? Have you ever had an impure thought before? Hester said, are you telling me that you equate an impure thought and rape as the same thing? Hester said. Greaves responded, sin is sin. The Hesters said Greaves then pushed them out of the ministry. Now, push them out of the ministry, that could be debated because basically you lose position, you lose stipend, you lose influence, and then now you're just kind of in the prayer room, and then you just like kind of go away.
Yeah, which it makes sense why he would do that, because he like sees, okay, these people are not going to like
The Hesters are his elder, FYI, just meaning they're probably about 10 years his elder, like Stuart.
Really?
Yeah, age-wise. Or maybe they're about the same age, maybe a little bit older. I just am saying like, age-wise, it's not like Stuart working with me, but the Hesters are like probably about the same age or older. I don't know. They're probably listening. Like,
I know. I'm like, what if they're younger? Gosh.
No, I just mean they're like, Stuart's in like 50 now, late 40s, 50s.
Okay.
Like, so I mean, they're about that. So I mean, and they're parents of multiple kids that are teenagers, big family, trusted family, and Jim's going, why did you tell her not to press charges?
Yeah.
Well, clearly they don't want that type of bad publicity coming in to IHOPKC, because those things start to happen and little things get exposed, and suddenly there's investigations, and suddenly somebody comes out and says, well, actually one of the leaders did this to me. Mm-hmm. Oh, actually Mike Bickle possibly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because clearly we have these allegations now. So I think we can probably...
There's still more to this article, but...
Well, it's actually...
Almost done. Why don't you just finish it real quick?
Yeah, I'll just finish it. Okay. All right. Hester said, okay, he doubled the man's stipend, sin is sin. Tiffany, another woman who asked to be identified only by her first name, said she tried to report sexual misconduct by her IHOPKC leader, former IHOPKC staffer, and Anna Daly verified, I knew Anna in the Night Watch, I think, Tiffany's identity with TRR. Tiffany claimed that the leader tried to initiate a sexual encounter with her when she was 19 years old and tried to remove her clothing. She said she pushed him off and told him to leave. Then she discovered the leader was simultaneously dating another student. Tiffany said she told a friend about the leader's behavior, who set up a meeting with her and with Greaves. I remember Greaves responded in a way that made me feel I had done something wrong, Tiffany said. Greaves removed the leader, Tiffany said, but she added that Greaves also grilled her with more questions about her account, disregarding the power differential between a student and a leader. He proceeded to tell me that this is like if you're in school and a teacher comes on to a student, or college, a teacher comes on to a student. And then they blame the student. And then it's like, come on. He proceeded to tell me that if I wouldn't have been so open to the pursuit of this man, then his natural instincts wouldn't have taken over. And I wouldn't have been in a position in the relationship I was with him, Tiffany said. And then I needed to deal with my inner harlot, quote, inner harlot. Greaves told her that she needed to attend Living Waters, a healing ministry led by Mike Bickle's sister, Tracy Bickle, largely focused on healing of sexual sin. I just was told that it was going to help me with my sexual sin. This was going to help me get better. I did the opposite.
It did the opposite.
Tracy Bickle did not immediately respond to the request for comment. Tiffany said she came to the program, came out feeling more ashamed and more trapped in a cycle of trying harder to meet approval. It's this never-ending cycle of trying to perform to a standard that takes away your worth and your value because you don't actually matter, Tiffany said. So no comments on Living Waters or things like that, but I'll just say that is a pretty wild article.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That said, that's a wrap for this one. We're going to come back and do another one and continue this conversation for probably 2 or 3 more. Thanks for listening.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.